Obviously it starts the vehicle without any problems. It should be securely mounted. Your steering parts, your steering wheel and your city horn in the middle of it. You have your steering wheel shaft. Your steering wheel free play on your steering wheel, you should have no more than 2 inches of play on a 20-inch wheel, and you would check that with the engine running. Just wiggle your hand backwards and forwards and watch the front tire. It shouldn't move more than 2 inches. Your city horn should obviously be working, and your steering wheel shaft shouldn't be bent, and you should have no side-to-side motion on it. That would mean your U-joints are getting loose, which is your next part, U-joints. You should only be able to rotate it a little bit. So your U-joints attached to your gearbox, and above your gearbox you have your power steering reservoir. This is one of the other fluids you're going to be checking, and this is one of the only fluids besides your windshield washer fluid you can check when the engine is hot. It has a hot side on the dipstick and a cold side, so when it swells up you'll have a higher level. You would check the hot side when the engine's hot. Coming off your gearbox, you're going to have your pitman arm, and it attaches to your drag link down here with a castle nut and cotter pin, so that way it has that pin through it so the nut doesn't rotate off when everything's turning. You're going to attach the next part to a steering ring knuckle. It will attach to the spindle, which is on the back of this hub over here. That's what the tire spins on. Then it goes to your steering arm. And then your tie rod goes all the way across, and each side of that tie rod you'll have a tie rod end that has threads on it, so you can adjust it for the toe of your tires or the balancing, things like that, so you don't go crooked down the road. If you're looking for your air dryer, it's straight down here behind the fuel tank. You'll have to look straight through this hole in order to see it. You're going to check that to make sure it's securely mounted. It's not leaking. You would hear air leaking out of it if it was. You want to make sure it cycles properly, which means it actually spits or sneezes when the truck reaches its full governor cutout 125. You should hear that liquid going psh, or the air spitting out the liquid. Alright, your air dryer, so your compressor and your governor are lubricated with the engine oil, all the parts inside there. So you're going to have oil traveling through there. You want to stop that before it gets into the first tank in line, which is your wet tank. It's also building hot air, and it's forcing it through small lines, so it's going to build moisture at the same time. That's what that air dryer's function is to stop whatever liquid that bypassed and came out of all that before it goes into the wet tank. Okay, it will not catch it all, so that's why we have to drain our tanks a minimum once a day, and you're going to start with the wet tank. You also want to make sure those tanks are securely mounted and not leaking. If it has 2 drain valves on one of the tanks, that means it's split into a bulkhead in the middle, so it's got 2 compartments, so you should have 2 drain valves. If it only has 1, it's a single compartment. Alright, we have our suspension next. This is a front steer spring suspension. You're going to start off with your frame on the top. You want no repair wells, no cracks, no holes drilled in it. Your spring hanger coming off the frame should be securely mounted, no nuts and bolts missing. The eye bolt in the bottom should be tight, because that's what's holding on your mainspring. Your mainspring can have no damage at all, perfect condition. The leaf springs underneath, it depends on how big and badass your truck is. You can have a lot of leaf springs or just a couple. If you have a lot of leaf springs, you will have C-clamps holding all those springs together so they don't twist. In other words, if they started twisting off this way, and you turn your tire, you would run the side of your tire right into the leaf springs. So they're designed to stop the leaf springs from twisting on each other. Those leaf springs, you can't have more than 1/4 of any one of those leaf springs missing, cracked, or broken. Keep following it back. We have what we call a USA. You have U-bolts. They go through your axle, and you have nuts on the bottom which holds it all tight to the axle. You have a saddle for the U-bolts to sit on. And on this saddle we have a rubber bumper on the top. So in case it hits the frame, you have rubber hitting the frame instead of your metal U-bolts. And you got your axle. So there's your USA, U-bolt saddle axle. Keep following it back, you have a shock absorber.